Welcome everyone to episode 6 now of Inner Sanctum. My name is Dan,
And I'm Kat.
and we are going to be interviewing one of our friends today, Isabelle Rizo, who's a co-partner at the School of Occult Arts, where she lectures with us, as well as a co-retreat facilitator with us for things like the Numinous Retreat and anything else that we're going to be announcing soon.
Yes.
But before we jump into that, Kat, you've been reading about dreams.
Yes. Well, I watched a little lecture on lucid dreaming and I thought it was pretty good. I kind of was expecting something else because a friend of ours asked us if we had done any lectures on astral projection or lucid dreaming or dream work. And it's something that I've been interested in. I've talked in Inner Sanctum before, I think in our very first episode about dreaming and doing magic and dream, maybe first and second episodes. And so I was thinking, okay, well, let's do some more research. And I did some internet search and I signed up for a little free lecture on lucid dreaming. And it's been hard for me to find really concrete steps to induce it or concrete really anything around lucid dreaming. And maybe it's because dreaming is just such a slippery thing. But everything I've read so far has been merely confirming things that I've just experienced from physically being alive and dreaming.
Right. Yeah, I have read there are multiple different types of induction techniques for lucid dreaming. The most important one, or the most important like practice, both for an occultist, but also someone who's trying to explore lucid dreams or the astral realm, which as far as I'm concerned, they're more or less two of the same things.
Depending on your tradition, I guess.
Yeah, but even so, like at what point are we just kind of describing the same stuff through various lenses? I think it's a difficult thing to purely tack down, but the dream journal is obviously super important and you should be doing it. And that is probably the biggest step you can take to increase your success in lucid dreaming or astral projection. The techniques that are listed are often either a waking induced lucid dream, which is where you get up in the morning about an hour before your alarm would normally go off and then fall back to sleep with the intent of having a lucid dream. That's sometimes referred to as a wild in shorthand, waking induced lucid dream. And then there's meditation induced lucid dreaming, where before laying down at bed at night, you essentially meditate or lay still until your body believes that it's fallen asleep, but you are still consciously aware. And then you can remove the consciousness from the body and trigger like an out-of-body experience.
You and I were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. I had that experience, and I asked you if you'd ever had an experience where like parts of your body seem to like grow beyond their normal size, and there's just a focus on it, or you seem to be compressed to your just your core. Like different things happen when you are still and in that maybe pre-hypnagogic, maybe hypnagogic state.
I think it's hard to know because I don't have a ton of success triggering lucid dreaming. And I haven't since college, but I've stopped trying to.
It was important to you in college.
It was.
But now less so.
Less so, although I can imagine a world where I get back into it. I don't think I would enter through the gateway or the framework of lucid dreaming as much as I would through the astral realm, because I think it changes the way things show up and your relationship to them. So for example, when I become lucid in a dream, if you frame it as just like lucid dreaming, there is, and people have written about this at length, there is the sudden and overwhelming desire to just have sex with whoever is in your dream space. Like, oh, we are going to bone now.
Which is understandable.
And a lot of people, I think, use lucid dreaming for like, oh, I want to fly and I also want to have sex. But I'll talk about flying because
picture as well.
Right. So when you reframe that to the astral, suddenly it becomes maybe a little bit more important to like do the thing you're there to do.
Because there's more reality, I guess, or there's more perceived reality.
No, it's that there's more of a mission. Like if it's lucid dreaming and it's just a VR video game for you to experience from a materialist, like I'm dreaming now space, it can be really easy to just say like, well, now I'm just going to go and fly because I'm here now. But if you're approaching it from like a spiritual space of like, oh, this is the astral world and I can connect with like entities or I can read the Akashic records or whatever, there's more emphasis on achieving that goal and doing that thing.
Suppose. I think it's just intention. Like, what is your intention for these practices? You
Sure.
could easily just astral project to astral project and have
Yes.
fun and float outside of your body and have
Sure.
that intentional out of body experience just to see what happens. The thing that I think is maybe another difference is astral projection. I feel like it's harder. What do you think? Because a lot of people will naturally dream, remember their dreams, and even lucid dream at some point.
Yes.
But not a lot of people report that they've had like intentional out of body experiences.
No, but I think that's what you're describing is what I am. That's the
Yeah.
framework that makes it easier. Like lucid dreaming will happen by accident, and it's enough of a phenomena that researchers have kind of investigated it from a materialist angle.
Sure.
And the best that they've come up with is maybe you're dreaming that you think you have control over your dream, but you're not actually conscious. That is not really an applicable or acceptable worldview if you're approaching this from a space of I'm going to be astrally projecting. Because again, you have the profound, in most cases, like a profound spiritual desire to explore this. And so you will make it happen with dedication that might otherwise be lacking from just, I want to experience the dream space.
Okay.
But that's literally
There's
just in
more
the way we talk
spirituality.
about it.
So
Right.
it's like how we understand these things as different, but they're not really. Is that what you're saying? Like the differences in how we see it and how we talk about it?
I think it's like layers. I think it's levels. I think
Yeah.
it's like you have, there's no difference between you and I walking down the street and some other third person. Like we're all walking terrestrially down the street. Our feet are on the concrete and we're
Okay.
going somewhere. But in the same way that like you and I might have a vastly different spiritual understanding of why the street is there, what's happening on multiple layers of reality, I think the same is true within the lucid dream space. I think the lucid dream is probably like the biggest circle, and then there are concentric circles layered inside of it.
Okay.
So if you can recognize that your objective is not to just be in the circle, but to get into the next level of that circle, you see more of the dream world that has more resonance, makes more sense for you, has a greater sense of import.
Okay.
You're not going to be like, I had this wild dream about, hot dogs last night and they tasted great. There's the desire for that to mean or be something more, right?
Yeah. Or you might ask more of the hot dog.
Right. Exactly.
You might ask it to bring you a specific truth or healing through your physical body. You might do anything you want.
You might literally just ask it why it's there. Like, why are you here? Why are you here?
Why the hot dog?
Right.
Well, that's interesting. Like interpreting a dream within the dream is a cool possible consequence of lucid dreaming. Now, have you ever lucid dreamed?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, more back in college. I've had a few lately, but they're not successful. It's like I'm becoming lucid and then you wake up.
Oh.
That sucks. But I have had a lot of success in lucid dreams for asking to speak with a specific thing that I view as emblematic of an issue. So back when I was in college, I lucid dreamed specifically, and when I would wake into the lucid dream state and become aware, I would like shout out within the dream, like, I want to speak to the future version of myself that is a magician, right? And then talk to that entity and see what's going on there. I will say that I never really got a lot of valuable information, but I think that's because I was approaching it with a very like novice, pre-occult kind of view of what it could potentially offer.
Yeah, and just like in divination or other magic practices, sometimes you're just not ready to receive the information.
Right.
Even if you're receiving it, you're still not getting
exactly
what it's actually meaning because you just can't imagine that possibility yet.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That's really cool though.
It is. What about you? You've had lucid dream experiences.
I've had some recently. No, no intention except for that I want to enjoy the lucid dream.
Mhm.
I would say that it's been nice.
That's deeply
Just
valuable
have
though.
fun can be nice.
Like, but yes, that is a really valuable experience because, and it's been a kind of teacher, I think, for you too, to be like, well, what
Yes.
is fun? What do I enjoy? And then to
So
see
it
the
is what
mind,
I needed, I guess.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, but dreaming we've both been more on it with the dream journal and
Yes.
trying to encourage more dreams. And I would say we've had mixed results with
Um,
Valerian tea.
yeah, Valerian tea, mixed results with
Sometimes
that.
it just really puts you out,
Yeah.
and you don't really remember
The
anything that
best
happened.
or the most success I've had is with the waking induced um lucid dreaming of
Okay,
like I wake up earlier than I should
right,
and then say I'm going to go back to sleep. And
right.
as I'm going back to sleep, I just keep repeating,
You know
I'm
that
going to lucid dream. I'm going to wake up in a lucid dream.
that has happened to me because our cat Hermes will wake me up
Hmm.
sometimes, or I'll be woken up by other bodily needs, and then I'll go back and I'll just really remember a
Yes.
very vivid, maybe meaningful dream.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
That's something to continue exploring then. And as
Definitely.
we move towards exploration, you might see some of the themes we're talking about around dreaming and desire come up in the interview that we have with Isabelle about the film A Dark Song, which we mentioned last week in our film occult film
Lineup.
right, but we
Kind of.
didn't talk about it because we knew it
No,
was coming today. If you haven't seen it, it is free to watch on Amazon Prime. So go and watch that now or watch it tonight and then come back and listen to us or listen to us and then go and watch.
there will be spoilers.
Yes, if you're liking this podcast and you're enjoying the kind of informal nature of it, uh, let us know in the comments, like, share, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all the things you need to do to find us in your feed.
In your future.
And so that the YouTube magical algorithm will place us with more individuals who like this kind of conversation.
Yeah.
And I think in a YouTube homepage that is mostly a glut of crypto scams and people complaining about diversity in film or movies, this might be a welcome reprieve from that garbage. Yes. So please feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you, everyone. In a moment, we're bringing Isabelle online. All right, and now Isabelle is here with us. So we're going to start out just jumping into Isabelle, your occult film recs or films you enjoy.
Yes. So I'm we'll go from spectrum of light to
Sure.
I think most applicable. Kiki's Delivery Service, #1.
Okay.
My cat's name Gigi for obvious reasons. I think it's a great representation of going off and finding your own path, and I also resonate a lot with Kiki as a former digital nomad. Finding magical practice in that way, and then losing, right, like, oh, this is why I thought I was doing this, to then like, oh wait, this is what I'm really good at, and
right.
That kind of thing. So and it's light, and you can rewatch it many times, and it's very cute, and the soundtrack is amazing.
The soundtrack is excellent.
Isn't it? It's so good. It's so good. And then the other one that I'm really excited to talk about is Dark Song.
Mm-hmm. Oh wait, much darker than Kiki's Delivery Service.
It is like the edges of the spectrum of viewing film, occult films. And I really liked it. Because you'll watch films and they'll say they're horror or whatever, and they're spooky and that, which fine, all good. And this one is labeled as horror, but I didn't take it that way. I think maybe if you're a mainstream audience not involved in the periphery of occult, maybe you're like, what is this, right? Because of the ceremonial magic that's there, the relationship between the two characters that are happening in the film. And do I want to give some of the premise for folks that
let's jump in, because Dark Song was one we held off on watching until just a few days ago in preparation for this. I had seen some advertisements for it, oddly enough, in like a kind of synchronistic way, before I saw your story that you shared about watching this. So yeah,
Yeah.
what's the synopsis for the people who haven't seen it?
So, big idea, woman going through grief, wanting to receive something on the other side of grief that may have to do with immortality, and rising from the dead. And her whole journey into ceremonial magic, working with this occult practitioner. And there's very much a lot of metaphor. There's very much a lot of inner and outer journeys represented beautifully, I think, in this film. And by the end, there's a very magical turn of events and of transfiguration, transformation that occurs for the protagonist, that you're like, wait, that's not what I expected, but it kind of was, but it kind
Yes.
of
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like everything we hoped for, but there was a little something different that was very satisfying
Yeah.
also.
And I think the mirror of I loved the setup with having the occult practitioner, the magician, being very, he's not Gandalf. He's clearly dealing with his own stuff, and he's an asshole.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
I loved the turn for her, the main character, as she reveals to him, like, okay, what I'm actually doing here is I want vengeance. I want to kill this other person. And his disgust of that, of like, you idiot, like that's what you're gonna choose. You could have anything, and that's it. But the dismissiveness of that from her, I think, is perfect, because for most people going through like occult work, in the beginning, it is all like purely kind of physical stuff. It's like, I want money, or I want love, or I want, whatever. I want to harm my enemies. And then when you have that, like, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but then when you have that numinous experience where all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now I'm talking to a god or an angel, or I don't know what this is. There's that sudden like, oh wait, this is so much bigger. Like this is huge. And I think the wizard's kind of continual emphasis on then you'll know, then you'll know. You don't understand the fullness of that knowledge until the very end, because then she knows.
Right. And you feel it with her. And it very much is a numinous experience, the beyond words, but the knowing. And yeah, I didn't even pick up on that when he would say, oh yeah, you'll know. Or there were these little synchronicities that would happen, and he's like, oh, you'll know, it's happening already. And it easily can be shifted into like, oh yeah, this guy is just full of it. And yeah, there's some leaves that are there, or some flowers that spontaneously, like, they weren't there, like that's some bullshit. But actually, like, those are the things that we're shifting awarenesses into different spaces. And even when he started the ritual, like putting salt around the entirety of kind of like the castle house that they were in, and then she steps out of it.
Yes.
That was very interesting, because he warned her, like, if you step out of this, you're gonna break something, you're gonna break reality and what we've created here. And I think that's something very, very important as occultists and as facilitators, that once you step in, stuff's gonna change. And I was talking to my partner about this when we were watching, and he's like, oh, is that why you tell people to not work with you? And I'm like, yes, because stuff happens. Or before somebody works with me, they always get sick. Before they work with me, they always end up getting sick. They end up because most people that I work with have to rest. And so their body forces them to rest. And then when we meet, we've created something. We're both in a different awareness, and I don't think, I'm like, him taking it seriously when she says, well, no, I'm really doing it for these reasons. And his reaction was like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And you know what? Speaking of that process, I was thinking of how we always use the oud in SOA, of like, well, what is it that you want? but what is it really that you want? But what's really underneath that, right?
Yeah.
So we can intellectually, as much as possible, get to the inkling of the numinous to take us on the right path versus doing all these magical workings and then being like, well, nothing's happening because we've not entered that frame of mind for the right path.
Getting clear on your desires. I mean, Dan and I have talked about that magic is not an effective way to get clear on your desires necessarily. The more effective way is the ood, or like the exploration and examination of desire through many different means. But I wonder how the movie would be different if she got clear on her desires.
This is the thing. I think there wouldn't have been a movie, right? Like I joked at the end with my partner, and then also with my therapist. I said, if she just journaled it, this wouldn't have happened. Well, but then would she have would the ending have occurred as it did though for her?
And I kind of think that not only does she get what she gets what she wants, even though she doesn't realize that that's actually what she wants. In the same way, I found that mirrored by the actual like magician occultist figure, because he reveals like, my deepest desires after this, I'm disappearing, I'm gone, you'll never see me again.
Yes.
And then the movie ends with him being, his body being buried in a lake where it will never be found. And he has kind of been expunged from this plane of existence. It's, I think, an effective reminder too for magicians and occultists that there's always like that. Well, what are we really after? This gets into kind of like the psychoanalyst, like, what is the death drive too? Like, because we still have that, like, even as occult practitioners, there are times where you get on the other end of that communication and you're like, oh shit, I'm totally not where I thought I was. And there's this other level here that needs to be explored.
Yes.
Yeah, and like the consequences of your ideal life, of your ideal wish.
Yeah.
I think there was something playing maybe as well with him experiencing the pain and the very, very slow death, and him minimizing that to the point of trying to hide away everything. So making himself invisible.
Ooh, yes. The slow, because it was slow and painful for him.
Yeah.
And the avoidance throughout, like even the first, maybe was it like the second scene or something, we meet him and we see that he's abusing, substances, and it's this avoidance.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, well, what is there that is being avoided? And then so much so that's like, I just want to disappear because it's that bad. Right.
Yeah. And that is a really good modern read on like occult practitioners, I think. Because you look at occult practitioners just like historically, and so many of them have really great or really incredible occult like ideas, but then what we would consider like the normative like personal life, like a lot of them struggle with forms of addiction, a lot of them struggle with like interpersonal relationships, finances, all of those things seem to be lightning rods for occult dysfunction.
Could they also be the lightning rods for the impetus of their occult, right, their workings or their creations? But if they were to, this is why we're all fans of Jung and Liber Curatoria coming up, is like, if you don't integrate with that shadow, it will destroy you. And this avoidance, and I think we all see it in occult communities, new age communities, of this avoidance, and then there's scarcity, there's really toxic relationships, no boundaries, all these really bad things that we're not looking at the deeper things, and that's the hidden stuff, that's the occult stuff, right? Which is so funny. It's so funny. Humans are
it is, because it sounds like such a dodge, and it's one of my early frustrations with magic is the conversations in like an online space, and even like within written like good occult books, we'll call them good ones,
Yeah.
this kind of emphasis on, yeah, you think you want this, but you really don't. Like the value of this is something bigger, different, and definitely life-changing, but absolutely not in the way you think. And to, I think, a lot of people getting into magic, that concept is immediately one that can like feel like a closed door, feel like a dodge, like, oh, so you're telling me that this doesn't matter physically. This is all just, brain stuff. This is all just my, development of character or whatever. I hated that.
Self-help.
That is a real,
Right.
once you're on the other side of it though, and this is the struggle of like articulating it, once you're on the other side of that ineffable experience, then you're like, yes, of course.
Yes. And of course,
Yeah.
elevated and are totally on the other side, totally integrated all of our shadows.
Yes, absolutely.
We're done as people.
Perfection, enlightenment, we are here.
So like even a few steps on that journey, you can look back and say, oh, there's been tangible progress and I can appreciate this in a new way.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot more to go.
I will say the end of the film reminded me of the, and we'll include a little YouTube link here, but the Onion interview with God, where the reporter just ends up screaming, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I love that representation too of the angelic entity, because that is so, she ends up apologizing, like that's a refrain for her in that final like few minutes of the film about how sorry she is. And I think we can kind of read that as like a capitulation from her, like that admittance of some kind of guilt. There is that like component baked in, but it's not like, oh, I'm sorry for transgressing. It's just, oh, you have like this whole path. You're doing this whole thing. Like you are doing this cosmic thing and I'm but a piece of it. And that is, there is that feeling, I think, when you do ceremonial magic work and work with some of these entities of just like, oh crap, I shouldn't be here. Like I shouldn't be aware of you. And I am aware of you, so I'm sorry for that, because you're doing stuff. Like you're not just floating in the cosmos waiting for me to ring you up to ask for like more money. You're doing something. You have like a celestial project. That is one of the coolest parts of magic though for me, is this like awareness of you're not, especially I think coming out of Christianity, of like, there's a sky daddy up there who's just kind of like watching everything and might be a little bored. There's like agency and urgency to these entities' lives and their own being.
I agree with that. And the immediate kind of words that came to mind is, even from the Christian tradition, humility and being humble, or the humble will, or the meek will inherit the earth. Yeah. Right. And I think it gets, if we're not in that ineffable mind space, spirit space, or awareness, then it easily in this material, pragmatic world gets interpreted as be meek, be humble, be small. It's like, no, we're talking about something greater here of, oh, like you said, oh, I shouldn't be seeing this, but I'm here. And this is such an honor to witness and be a part of. It's this humility of, I am getting to witness and appreciate and be a part of. And also with my own little tiny, consciousness can influence in the tiniest way. But to even do that is like the power of the magician. Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, because I came out of like my early magic work was very chaos oriented to a ceremonial space. I know there's a lot of criticism of like ceremonial pieces, and this came through in the movie too, of like, we have to do this multiple times. This is all like mostly going to suck as far as like invocational ritual looks. And as a film, this looks like a very good representation of doing ceremonial magic, and like the meditating on like a stone, or the sitting in circles and then working it and being like, oh, I have to do it again. Like it didn't work the first time, and it didn't even work in the first circle of the first time. I have to do all of this again. That kind of barrier of entry is always very criticized in ceremonial magic, of like, why are we doing all of this? I almost think though that kind of like layered approach or the layered ritual component, yes, it's necessary for like the consciousness shift, but I also wonder if like these entities, these beings set up these inordinately frustrating tasks simply to like weed out the people who aren't, like we talk about this with like finding like fit clients sometimes, like, oh, this person's a great fit, this person isn't. I do really think a lot of that like footwork is, yeah, if you're going to waste my time or you're going to bother me or interrupt what I'm doing, we want to make sure the right people are coming through, right? Not to say
Yeah.
that we're the right people,
Right,
but we're at
right.
least the ones who stick with it to bother them.
I completely agree with that. And I'm reminded of the other film with the Karate Kid. Wax on, wax off, right? Like meditating on the stone or wax on, wax off.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of premise. And I think this is that. I felt with this film for the first time there was some Western esoteric representation.
Yeah.
Because we see the West fetishize the East with their meditations and Zen Buddhism and things like that. And it's just like, yeah, we've had that too. And there's very much overlap with these practices. And so why aren't we looking again? Why are we looking outside and not in with these practices? But media representation definitely helps.
Yeah. I think absolutely.
Indeed. Well, I have a question for you both. I think in some of the final scenes, if viewers who are watching, if you are not expecting spoilers, we will continue to spoil.
Yes.
I believe those entities or demons take off her ring finger. And I wonder, what do you think is the significance of that? Because as a palmist, I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? But as a person, like that's where you put the wedding ring, the commitment. But it's also the finger of like creativity and appreciation of art. And maybe these, I don't know, would it be connected to mystical experiences, perhaps, like the ability to see something so beautiful as the holy guardian angel?
Well, I think, and Isabelle, jump in. Like I don't just jump on that, but I have an idea.
Go for it.
Well, I think the commitment component is the most important part of that scene of like, yeah, that's the finger where you have your, your wedding ring. That's where you make your vows, right? Like that is in many ways, it's a realistic anchor point for her desire. Like that child is the result of some kind of union. She's made a commitment that she's going to like punish this person who abducted the child, which is like the subtext or it's
text.
Yeah, it's the text.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really think like that underworld descent and then the removal of that is really a good representation, if not a little bit of like a shadowed one in the film, of needing to be in a space to communicate with these beings of some degree of unattachment from your goal. Like to me, it was about like lust for results, that sort of thing. The commitment moves beyond like I will, get my vengeance for you, to I am open to see whatever kind of comes out of this space, and whatever I can do within it is going to be, I don't want to say for the greater glory of God, but along the lines of some kind of cosmic consciousness.
Yeah. What's interesting, as I was still thinking about the ending with the angel, the big reveal. So I was still in that headspace, and then I remember that the attack with the underworld happened. I know, my partner cannot do like hand stuff like in film, so he's just like, tell me when it's done, like we're good. But because she's driving away in that end scene, and then you see like she has the bandage still on, and kind of thinking about it again, like from that palmistry perspective too, and thinking about vows, and also the left is also that kind of feminine side and like polarity theory. I wonder if it's a weird kind of backward way of looking at maybe of like the reward of she stuck through this commitment and doing the ceremonial magic. She went down through the underworld and she still came out not unscathed,
Right.
but as a reminder of this vow. And also, if anything, it's in a numinous type of kind of marriage metaphor, seeing the holy guardian angel is almost like that moment of marriage where it is gone, it is beyond human. We take away the physical form.
Yeah.
She comes away in a holy transfigured state, and she leaves with that, and that's physically gone for her.
I like that. There's also something that just reminded me of when you were talking about this that kind of frames it even maybe a little bit more tightly around what you're saying. When the only time we see characters vocalize without hearing audio is when her finger is cut off, and then when the angel talks.
Yes.
And angel talks, it's the you see the vibration and the reaction, but you don't hear anything. And to me, that was like great as occult work because it's about the vibration. It's not about the sounds we make. Like it's about the sound and vibration, but it's not about the words.
Yes, it's both and.
Yeah. So in that, there's like this pure, like, very emotionally felt, very like piercing vibration, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think that kind of, I don't want to say like, no, I will say it. I think if we look at like the aesthetics and some of like the mystics, like there's always been this idea of purification of the body, but also like ecstatic states. I think that there's some overlap there, which we also see in what's his name, Saint Maud, although to like the inverse effect.
Right. Well, if anything, if we're going to continue on with this metaphor with Saint Maud, did she then, I mean, from a material perspective, it's madness.
Yeah.
From an occult mystical perspective, she has reached the ultimate.
Yeah.
If we're going to go back with like the severed finger, the severed end of body and a material.
I do wonder if there's something there as well, and I'm forgetting exactly who, and I should remember, but the goddess who traveled to the underworld and had to give up
Persephone.
Yes.
Herself and
clothing.
Then Nana maybe as well, but having to give up certain levels, and then to the point where she has fully humbled herself to descend to the underworld. And I believe in this myth she was rescuing brother Nana.
I think so.
Oh, okay. Different.
I need to look that up. So
it's a common like cross-religious, cross-cultural motif.
Descent on the world, just sacrifice, and then like rising up again. So interesting. And I think it's really cool before we leave this topic, as I feel we are threatened to do. It's really cool to see a woman in the role of doing ceremonial magic.
Yes. And you know what's interesting, and it still stuck with me, and I'm still I think processing it, maybe not consciously but unconsciously. The moment of my Christian background is showing the simple nature of the occultist when he gives into like, I just need you to put on makeup and I need you to do this. And I thought part of me was like, oh, sex magic, we're going to see like ritual type of, and I was kind of excited, not in a like, ooh, sexy time way, but like, oh, here's some representation. And it wasn't. And it was the shadow aspects of like, oh, I'm gonna use, and I don't want to throw the occult community under the bus, but there is abuses of that nature, right? It's throughout, and sex magic is one of the most powerful types of magic around, and to see that represented in the film, I thought was a very interesting choice. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, because then you see her natural mistrust and disgust with him. Thoughts?
I think immediately, Dan and I were like, there shouldn't be sex magic in this ritual.
Yeah, well, of course.
Yeah.
It's ceremonial. It's about purity of self, and detachment. And then when it played out, I was like, that makes sense. Like, it's unfortunate, but that tracks like narratively from multiple perspectives.
Yeah. There was something very transactional, and like I didn't enjoy, but I liked that it highlighted like something I think you see in any spiritual tradition, whether you're talking about like occult priests or gurus or whatever. There's always this conversation around, power imbalances and people essentially just, taking advantage of other people. And I thought the way he framed it of, oh no, this wasn't a ritual, I just need to purify myself, is like such an easy,
focus,
right, high-minded justification for, obviously an ethical wrong.
Yes.
That tracks. Not like, I mean, it tracks. We know the community. We know, some of the people who are written about as like the most high-minded and spiritually evolved, it turns out, actually are, very known predators within this community.
Yeah, and many other communities that are well known as well.
And one of the maybe pitfalls of magical work, or something that we all should be aware of, is that once you're working within a magical context, you do realize the universe is bigger, my values and morals might need to shift or be realigned or change. Once you accept that radical responsibility, though, of reforming your own morality, you also have to be aware you can now justify anything you want to do if you're not being deeply honest with the self and working through that process.
I think this is always the case.
Oh, yeah.
It's just you realize your freedom within certain systems that are more free.
Yeah.
Such as magic, generally.
And I think
maybe I won't say that.
If I'm
backtrack, because magic isn't always more free.
No. I think if I'm remembering it correctly, that event is ultimately what precipitates their argument in the kitchen where he ends up getting stabbed and dying. Is that correct, or did I misconstrue that?
I think so. I think there was the undercurrent there.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, some maybe unconscious sex magic occurred and something else was born from that, right? So it is.
It was literally the lack of like how he's handling this. The only thing that mattered for him was to get her what she wanted ultimately in the end. And so we're going through all of those stoplights where he, other people would ask for consent or not take that route of like some of the most ancient initiatory traditions.
True.
And for him, it was this like, you agreed in the beginning, therefore I move past all these things where I should naturally stop or naturally ask for consent.
Yeah. And I think it also shows like the peril of trying to like jumpstart someone's occult like movement, someone's occult search. Like he does the initiation to like, connect her with the other side by drowning her in a tub.
Yes.
And she sees nothing. She has no experience, which totally tracks with like the history of occultism, like people who are given too much information, or you try and engineer some kind of experience for them. It has to happen organically. Like it has to happen at that person's speed. So I found that stuff to be very layered and interesting. Also, the stabbing of him as well, like, which is accidental during their fight. Maybe we're not given everything with this film,
right.
But the immediate like thing that jumped into my mind is if this had happened, had happened maybe a little bit in a space of more like benevolence, you could draw an analogy to like a Jesus character of like the wound in the side. And there's part of that, but I thought more, and again, we were talking about like past references, I thought more of like the Pauline, like the thorn in my flesh kind of thing, the thorn in my side, where Paul is constantly writing about this thorn in his side. which we don't really know what that is historically, but probably something messed up. It's Paul.
I think the frustrations he's had with multiple letters to multiple churches, just like the thorn in my side with you people.
Yes, but that's definitely become a specific conversation point in occult work, and definitely this kind of like angelic occult work that's very ascetic and requires purification, of directly linking that thorn in the side to like some kind of sexual like desire that's not leaving. And I thought that was a really like I thought it was very pointed, maybe, and your reference to that.
I didn't even think of that, but yes, because I was thinking again, it was on the left side, I believe, and it was like backstabbing.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
it was coming out of the gut as well. And there's something there with him being, because he's the practitioner with her, so there's going to be things that are going to be mirrored.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of the womb and birth and women and
Oh yeah.
the more collective patriarchal things that are going on, not to make this whole symbol the patriarchy, but like the interesting literal backstabbing that he did, and then where it happened, where her womb would be on him, was
You're right.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
Because
Yeah.
they're also inextricably bound from the outset. He's cutting something and she's lying to him, he claims, and he cuts himself and says that she causes it. And she obviously is like, no, like, you're crazy. That's not, I have no control over this whatsoever.
Yeah.
But they establish that, they really do establish that connection between the two of them outside of just someone paying for services, but being like a part of the ritual working for its entirety. Yeah, I think I hadn't considered that. I like that.
I mean, any film that has so many metaphors and possibilities of like collective archetypes and metaphors and myth laid into it is magical for me, and can be taken in so many ways. Because even my magical practice is very much like contemporary psychodynamic chaos,
Yeah.
culturally influenced. So to see this film and the representation was really good. And it may be another film, it may be one of those films that I'll rewatch again and find new things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really captured the weirdness of occult work in ways that other occult movies haven't. The only other one I'd put near it is Saint Maud. I feel like it's similar. They both explain the weirdness, and I mean, Saint Maud exceeds I think the reach of the film exceeds its intent, but both of them showcase the weirdness of angelic interaction or saint magic in a way that is, I think, very accurate. Like, it's a very compelling and effective representation of what these things are, which underscores like the traditional magician's warning of like, oh, this stuff is dangerous. And everyone always says, well, how dangerous can it be? Like, what are you talking about? Are you just, inflating your own ego? Yes. And it's actually deeply unmooring.
Yeah. Yeah. Where my intersecting interests of madness and mysticism definitely come in, and I think it's a matter of perspective and perspective in also the numinous ineffable sense as well. And I think that goes with, as we talk a lot about placebo as well, and the power of the mind and belief, but then also it's so much, I think what the difference may be is the magician is standalone and can then decide to work on this alone as a solitary practitioner or within a coven. Whereas if you're doing maybe more of like a contemporary chaos magical practice, you are then using the culture around you. You are using context. You are using linguistics in a way that might be, I find, more fun, I guess, more chaotic. But and I think it makes it, for me, it's also, I think, one of my values of accessibility plays into that. But as a standalone magician, this is where I get into the art studio. I can put on my magician hat of like, I am in my world, right?
Yes.
Like the salt is around me. I am here. I am making up words. I am connecting with this. I'm choosing this tradition. I'm, playing with these kind of rituals. That's when some weird magical stuff happens that I don't always share in my contemporary accessible chaos magic
Sure.
practice. So I think, yeah, there's something there with the both and as well.
Yeah, it's really what convinced me that when we're doing magical workings, we're not working in a purely mental model, but we're working in some kind of spiritual framework.
Yes.
Because I know you can intellectualize some of like the desires that people have and that we're not being like clear with and what our subconscious wants and those things. But I really get the sense when you're doing something like Saint Magic or you're doing something like angelic workings or ceremonial work to that end, to like work with Enochian beings. I kind of feel in some ways like I think Psyche, our cat, must feel like there are times where she does not want to be interrupted and I like will come over and pick her up and she hates being picked up, but I love
Yeah.
her. And so I'm
Yeah,
going to love
right.
her. I feel that way sometimes with this work where it's like, you're not, you are in some ways being moved around the board by these entities. Like in some way they pick you up and put you somewhere else. And maybe you don't want that. Maybe you just wanted to be asleep. I
Right.
definitely feel like that came through in Numinous too. When we were working in that castle, like we didn't know anything about the interior outside of some pictures online.
Right.
And not only was it perfect for all of our ritual workings, it also had this like really weird emphasis on saints. Like, first of all, you're in North Carolina, so there aren't like strong like Catholic or Orthodox presences in North
Right.
Carolina and Appalachia.
Yeah.
And then you're up in the mountains in this castle. And the two owners are not, well, the two people who worked there didn't seem strikingly like deeply religious people. Like, oh, we're
Yes.
very
Yes.
engaged and very
There was
pious.
a secular vibe. It wasn't, yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, but except here are all these, like statuaries, which makes sense, but then also like they're putting in large paintings of saints like within the general hall area. And I thought, how mystical and weird is this? Like, this is a co-creation piece for sure.
I'm thinking also of the moments in Dark Song when there were these surprising little synchronicities of the gold leaf or the flowers or these things that shouldn't appear, but they appear.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened to every single person at Numinous was some kind of little creature found them.
Yes.
Me with my millipede in the shower. and then the right, and the millipede kept walking around in the Great Hall, like all around checking everyone's rooms. Yeah. And then there was somebody that found a frog, another one that found a cricket, a slug or a snail, I think was one of them too.
Yep.
And I was like, what? So then I had everybody look up, right? Like, what is this symbolism? What is the meaning? And it was very interesting what was speaking through these little synchronistic creatures that came for a visit as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the film did a good job of like showing apports, which I don't think we had any apportations in Numinous that I can remember. However, I think sometimes people do mistake this idea of apports as like, oh, it has to be flower petals from from the middle distance, or it has to be coins or something that feels very spiritualist. I think that animal component is actually far stronger in witchcraft and ceremonial magic than just apportation is, because these are the familiars, right? Like these are the these are the familiars. So when people are finding, oh, here's this like, frog toad thing or the bees or the millipede, it's like a lot of these are historically significant. Like a lot of these have always been messengers of magical intent or magical messaging.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, there's again that mix of contemporary chaos, synchronistic things, and then group practice and entering different kind of worlds and ineffable numinous spaces.
Yes, and creating magical ceremony without drawing on all the tools used for initiation.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
What I was in when I was drafting our mission statement for Numinous, I was like, and we use all the tools to inspire transformation. And then I stepped back. I said, no, we don't. We don't do near-death experiences.
Right.
We don't do many things.
Well,
We do all positive and beneficial tools for people.
so I have
Techniques.
two
Right.
distinct reactions.
You
One
do.
being the positive. I love to say that like we do positive stuff, and for all intents and purposes, do positive stuff. However, I do often feel like even positive intent rituals, if they work correctly, can have results that feel adverse in the moment, or results that reveal things that are uncomfortable. We had talked about this on a previous podcast with like entheogens and people who have, bad trip experiences.
Yes.
The easiest way to kind of like navigate the bad trip experience is to like be like, well, what is making this uncomfortable for me? Like these negative thoughts or these panicked thoughts about this situation, do they reflect something that is real or tangible that I can grow from? And by putting that like perspective on it, oftentimes that experience gets much better. But it still is like there and helpful. And the more, as you said, Isabelle, the more we try and like push back against or sublimate or say like, no, I deny that this is happening.
Yeah.
That's when like trips really go bad, right? That's when people are like, oh my God, I can't handle this. I'm touching the face of God.
Yes, yes. Touching the face of God when you weren't prepared to touch the face of God, and then have God show you the shadow realm. Like, what?
Right. But I also, what you said was really, really cool. And Isabelle, you had mentioned part of it as well about like the choosing the ritual and saying like, okay, we don't need to do initiatory near-death experiences to have magical impact. I almost wonder if these entities, especially in the angelic, because you're seeing a lot of like new age literature around angels, and it's gotten weirder. It's less like fluffy, Christian angels who like give you love. It's gotten to a weirder space in the new age community now, which I think is the correct move. I wonder if these entities are making it easier to connect with them, so that like through the development of chaos magic, like is chaos magic just an easier way to talk with the angels or to talk with these entities?
Ooh.
Because that is like the information that most occultists request. Like one of the classic things to ask an angel is like, how do I contact you easier than this? Like, this was a lot of work, make it easier for me.
Right.
Magically not moving away from ceremonial magic as in we're abandoning it, but have we literally just gotten to the next iteration point?
Ooh. I would say yes, because that goes back to my thing of like contemporary accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working at the level of like celebrity occultists, right? And to have mass reception.
Sure.
Public facing.
Right. Yeah, public facing and like reception from an audience, that means a bigger group of people, right? And if it's easier to contact through contemporary means of I'm going on my walk and I'm collecting synchronicities, or I'm asking for this particular thing, and it may be the smallest kind of new agey spiritual hocus pocus, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the entry point for them to the deeper ineffable, I'm all here for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think though, this is my ethical anxious brain before, yes. Right? Of like, if it is so accessible then, and if we are in this next iteration, what consequences might we see in reality from that accessibility?
Thinking about the UFOs that we're just seeing.
I know.
And now we have to stop.
Yes.
We will get to this later.
Because it will begin to be a little too much for this conversation. But Isabelle, how are you accessible? Where can people find you? How can people find you?
So you can find me at isabellerizo.com. You can find me on Instagram, Isabelle Rizo BVP. That's for Bella V Productions. You can find me with Dan and Kat at the School of Occult Arts. Very excited for this upcoming semester.
Yes.
And then also at Numinous, where we're all going to hang out and meet new critters that may have messages for us, apparently.
Right. Yes, if you're interested in exploring this magical world without, ending up the same way the people in Dark Song ended up, you might want to come and enjoy some spiritual, magical exploration with us. But thank you, Isabelle, for coming on with us today. We love working with you at SOA and at Numinous and whatever else the future holds. Hopefully having you on for a longer podcast next time.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome.
Alrighty, y'all.
Thanks, Isabelle.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Thank you.